Hello, this is Dias and a new author's story from my channel Russian Revenge Story. Valery Semenovich sat relaxed in a chair and watched TV. He had been working as a surgeon in a small district hospital for 4 years. They provided him with housing, a tiny apartment on the second floor of a wooden house, but with water and radiators. The salary was lousy, but the prices here were nothing special. In general, he was resting now, resting in the literal sense of the word, because this was not work, but a fairy tale. The nurses kept trying to feed him. Valery could not remember the last time he bought food for home. Patients, and most of them were from villages, considered it their duty to thank the surgeon who had removed their appendix or an ingrown nail with food. Here everything was different from in a big city, and bribes were mostly given in kind, and gratitude was also given in kind, and he did not refuse. The people here were kind and sincere. If you refuse, you would mortally offend them. Valery Semenovich once worked in a good clinic in a big city. He was a young, promising surgeon. However, as it turned out, this was not enough for a good life. As the head doctor told him when he asked him to quit, "We don't need people without a clan or a tribe." And all because Valera had the imprudence to fall in love with the head doctor's daughter. However, at the time they started dating, he did not know whose daughter she was. He found out after her dad showed up at his house early in the morning and pulled his daughter out of his bed. However, at that time the daughter was already 25, but this did not stop the dad. To be honest, Valery Semenovich could not even imagine how it would all end. He thought that such lawlessness was left far back in the 90s, and there was no way it could happen now. He came to work and was immediately called to the head. "Write a letter of resignation." Valery was taken aback. "Why would that be?" "Write it yourself, if you don't want me to pin the theft of accountable medicines on you or something else." Valery looked at the chief and sat down to write a statement. He handed over the piece of paper and asked, "Well, can I find out what's going on now? I don't think I did anything bad. Anya and I wanted to get married." The chief doctor laughed. "Get married? Who needs you? A nobody. Who are you anyway? A penniless wretch." And then Valery snapped. In order to become a worthy person, he had gone through a path that not everyone would take. Yes, he really was from a family where there was never an extra piece of bread but all that was in the past. Valery gave the chief doctor a full-throated hook to the jaw, didn't wait to see how he landed, and left the office. And then he realized the head doctor would not forgive him. Valera wandered around the city's medical institutions for 2 months, but everyone looked the other way, and no one would hire him. Even the clinics that had previously tried to lure him away. So, when Valery was offered a job in the prison and in the women's hospital there, he simply had no choice. He will never forget those 3 years. Valery had seen and heard a lot in his life, but when faced with reality, he simply fell into a stupor. Sometimes it seemed to him that some of these women were the most evil creatures on earth. It was unclear why they behaved that way. Did they become embittered in the prison, or were they just like that from the start? They were constantly fighting among themselves, throwing dirty tricks, beating up one in a crowd, and in between all this, they managed to get pregnant by the guards, poison themselves, and cut themselves. He had all sorts of patients. He will never forget one of the first. They brought her in after a fight. They weren't just fighting, they were using homemade sharpenings. He barely saved her. There were many wounds, and while she was unconscious, Valery said to the nurse, who was also a prisoner, "If I met someone like that in normal life, I would think she was an angel. Why did they do this to her?" The nurse even gasped. "Oh, for God's sake. This is Sonia. What a bitch. She gave birth to a child when she was young and sent it to an orphanage. Then she got some rich guy to take her. He transferred everything to her name and she killed him. And here she was, the first to start all the squabbles, pitting women against each other and then admiring them. Sonia has a rotten soul. Everyone knows that you have to keep your ears open with her." Valery was, of course, in complete shock. He sat next to this Sonia all night, because one wound near the heart caused him great concern. "I did everything I could," he thought. "If she survives, then she will have to wear dresses with a closed neckline forever, unless, of course, she finds money for plastic surgery." In the morning she was taken to the central hospital and the convoy went with her. And if earlier patients were accompanied by 2, then this time there were 4. Valery only shook his head. So much for a gentle creature. He turned around more comfortably. Today was his shift at the district hospital. It was very rare that someone was brought in at night. Usually, conscientious citizens wait until morning and then call an ambulance. It seemed that he even dozed off a little. He was awakened by the nasty sound of a siren. Valera stood up and looked out the window. An ambulance literally flew into the hospital yard. It looked like something serious, since the maternity ward was on the first floor. He sat down again. It was probably time for someone to give birth. If they needed his help, they would call him. He grinned. Yes, a calm, measured life relaxes a person. All that was left was to get married, then grow a belly, buy a used foreign car. Stop. He had a car, and a pretty good one at that. He bought it when he had just started working in the big city. Quick footsteps were heard in the corridor. They were approaching. So, for him, the door swung open. Valery Semenovich, most likely, the man was brought in from a car accident. There was something like... Nurse Lenochka widened her eyes. She had only been out of medical school for 3 months, so she widened her eyes often. They ran down the corridor. Lenochka, apparently due to the strong shock, did not stop talking for a second. "They say that the car is cool. If it had been a little simpler, the guy would have died. But you can tell by him. There are only shoes there, like my 3 salaries, and a ring on his finger. Lena, talk about the matter." "What can I say, Valery Semenovich? Anyway, the ambulance said he's not a long-term resident." Valery ran into the examination room. The doctor from the maternity ward and 2 more nurses were already there. After a quick examination, Valery commanded, "Let's get the operating room and the patient ready." The doctor, his colleague, asked, "Valery, are you sure? It's one thing if he dies before, but what if he dies on the operating table? Are you suggesting we leave him?" The operation lasted 4 hours. Everyone who was in the hospital helped Valery. Only 2 nurses remained at their posts. When the doctors left the operating room, the same doctor who suggested taking their time drawled, "I don't understand what the hell you're doing here. You should be in a real hospital." Valery smiled. "Well, as you can see, I came in handy." The colleague shook his head, then extended his hand. "I take my hat off to you. I've never seen such skill, even though I've been in medicine for many years." Valery Semenovich barely left the patient's side for 2 days, and when he came to, he exhaled. "Well, now I can get some sleep." He returned to the hospital a day later and was immediately amazed. "Lenochka, what's going on here?" The nurses rushed to tell him that the man he was putting together piece by piece asked for a phone and called someone. "Oh, Valery Semenovich, what's going on here? So many people have arrived. Security, doctors from the capital, everyone gathered in the ward at once. New furniture, equipment. The head doctor is pale. They say this guy is some kind of real oligarch. Wow. They also asked you to visit the patient as soon as you can. The head doctor's orders. Okay, I'll just change. Valery Semenovich approached the ward. The guard glanced at his badge and immediately opened the door. Valery just shook his head. Like the president, honestly. Hello, patient. How are you feeling? The patient looked at him and smiled. You, as I understand, are the very savior who brought me back from the other world. Well, don't exaggerate. If your time had come, no one could have brought you back. So you were destined to live, and my merit is not so great. Oh, no, I've heard enough stories about you being a magician. Thank you. I still have too many plans, so I owe you. Stop it. This is my job. While Valery was examining the stitches and reading the chart with the tests, the man quietly said, If everyone did their job as well as you, there would be no problems in the country. Look, I'm the president of a huge company. Do you know how much money I have? I don't even know myself. I pay so much money to everyone around me, but it turns out that at any moment a wheel can fall off while I'm driving. How? How can people not understand what I'll ask them for this? Because they always hope that maybe it will pass, that it won't fall off, that I'll survive, or, on the contrary, that I'll die. Well, it's definitely too early for you to die. He raised his head. The patient was about 45, maybe a little older, penetrating eyes, a slight smile. And this despite the fact that he was in pain now. It simply couldn't help but be in pain. Well, if you say so, then we'll live. By the way, my name is Arkady Andreevich, for you just Arkady. And I am Valery Semyonovich. As you understand, in our hospital, which is fully supported by the state, there are not even half of the drugs that would not hurt you. Doctor, this is not a question at all. Arkady waved his hand, and then a man appeared next to him, whom Valery had not noticed before. The man was in a white coat, from which Valery concluded that he was the capital's doctor. In his hands was a heavy suitcase. The doctor extended his hand, introducing himself. Georgie, here, take a look. I think I have everything you need. I have sketched out a diagram, but Arkady Andreevich refuses to be treated without your approval. Well, let's approve it, Valery responded. In 3 weeks, Arkady was supposed to be transferred to the capital. He was sitting on the bed. He was allowed to get up, but not for more than 5 minutes. Valery, I'll call as soon as I find out something, he said. They somehow became close with this patient. Despite his money, Arkady turned out to be a great guy. I'll be grateful. There are very wonderful people here, but I want a job, a real one, Valery said. I won't forget, and in general I hope that we don't lose each other. Arkady didn't lie. A month later, Valery said goodbye to everyone and headed towards Moscow, where a very cushy job was waiting for him. He was talking on the phone with the head doctor, and he said, We pay very well, but we also work conscientiously. People are brought to us from all over Russia, so get ready to remember everything you know. He was ready. This is exactly what he wanted. Another 6 months passed. He managed to see Arkady only twice. The first time they just walked around and talked, because Arkady was still on injections. But the second time they got really drunk and had a very heartfelt conversation. One evening Valery Semyonovich got a call. He smiled. He and Arkady had chosen this melody together when they were destroying his supplies at the bar. Every time Arkady called him, Valery wanted to laugh because it was the music of Flight of the Bumblebee. Neither of them could remember why, but if they chose it, it must have been necessary. Valera, friend, hello. So, if friend, then something happened. You're too smart, as it seems to me. Arkady laughed. I fell in love. Well, almost fell in love. Of course, there are some pitfalls, but I'm getting married. Despite his age, Arkady had never been married and had no children. He was very worried about the latter. I was thinking of waiting. None of this could have happened, but Katerina is pregnant, and you know what that means to me. Well, I congratulate you. So, the wedding is in a month. You're an honored guest. I'll send an invitation. Valery had never seen such a crowd of rich people. He only ran into Arkady for a couple of minutes, and Arkady said that before the wedding he would definitely introduce him to his bride. Valery, your opinion is important to me. Okay, go already. About 20 minutes later, Arkady approached Valery. Please love and favor me, my Katya. A gentle creature stood before Valera. The woman was over 30, and she looked incredibly gentle, like a blonde angel, and then Valera felt as if he was struck by electricity. He handed someone a glass and stepped towards the bride. He quickly took her hand and tore the collar of her dress on her chest. The buttons cracked. The woman screamed. Arkady was indignant. What are you allowing yourself? There was a scar under the collar, noticeable, unsightly. It was obvious that someone had already worked on it, but it was still very noticeable. Arkady, I'm afraid to disappoint you, but your bride's name is not Katya. Her name is Sonia. The woman looked at him with eyes full of horror and stepped back, but there was security there. And you know what else? She can't have children. She has no uterus after a stabbing in prison, where she was serving time for the murder of a rich husband, which you were going to become. Arkady sat down next to Valery on the restaurant step. Valery turned to him. How are you? Yeah, fine. It's a shame that I fell in love with a child who doesn't exist. Thank you, Valery. I don't know why I turned out to be such a loser. I always checked everyone. And then, like a kid, I fell in love and forgot everything. Thank you. You're welcome. I ruined your holiday. Shall we go have a drink? The tables are set anyway. Let's go. Arkady waved his hand and hugged his friend. I'll get married anyway. I'll go to the city where you worked and marry your nurse, Lenochka. She made eyes at me, and she'll give me 3 sons and a sweet little daughter. Valera laughed. 4 sons. Oh, it doesn't matter. The main thing is that she gives birth to at least 1. If you liked the story, please support me with a like. And to learn about the release of new, interesting stories, subscribe to my channel. All the best to you. Thank you for watching.